New Superman movie is finally out, the start of the new revamped DC universe, just the DCU. James Gunn at the helm, writes and directs this film. It is clearly made by someone who loves comic books, someone who is versed in comic books. It's got a very sci-fi fantasy kind of element about it that is there from frame one right to frame, end of. One of the troubles I have with like the original Donner film, the Richard Donner film, is that film was so grounded. Like he tried to, and that's why I kind of love it. But once it gets to the end of the movie, when he's flying back through time and all that kind of stuff, I kind of get pulled out of it in that moment, because suddenly we get a little bit of fantasy that creeps in. Whereas previously, other than the stuff at Krypton on the beginning, which I can cope with because that's on a completely different world, all the stuff we get on Earth is very grounded. Whereas in this film, not so much. It's right from the get-go. We know we're in fantasy. We know we're in comic book world. We know it's sci-fi fantasy. So because of that, anything that gets a bit wacky in the film, I can go along with a lot more. I accept it a lot more because that's the kind of world we're in. It's been established straight away. I don't feel like we have to adhere to that grounded reality that the rest of the film has set up, a la the Richard Donner movie. And within that fantasy world, Gunn centres the story of Superman as, yes, an immigrant. Already, even before I came to watch this, I was well aware of everything that's flying around about the whole immigration stuff. Look, there is definitely a political element to this film, but I think that you can come to it looking for that and getting really hung up on maybe what side of the fence does Gunn come down on, and where's he taking swipes and this, that and the other. Or you can just say, you know what, this is a fantasy film, I can enjoy it for what its core message is. Now whichever side you may think it sits on, left or right, whatever, conservative or liberal, at the end of the day, this is just a film that is about treating people better. It doesn't go into all the ins and outs of immigration. It doesn't go into like certain arguments that you could have. Not all the sides are presented, but so what? This is a film about an alien who comes to Earth with superpowers and wants to save people. So yeah, let's try not get too hung up on the political kind of angle that may be taken, and just enjoy the ride for what it is, which is a sci-fi fantasy spectacle, which is all about just treating people better. I think we can all get along with that, I would imagine. I would hope. David Corenswet as Superman is fantastic. Henry Cavill, still my favourite Superman, even after watching this. But few movies down the line, if Corenswet keeps this up, he could very well take the crown. I'm very reluctant to hand it over to someone who's just done one movie. But certainly he sells me on the character. He's much more hopeful take on the character. I like the fact that he comes from, they play up the whole farm boy kind of angle even more than perhaps they have done in the past. The way he talks, the way he kind of doesn't swear for most of the film. There's a few joke asides where he kind of does, but that's because he's pulled into stuff that's going on with other people and he's kind of repeating what they're saying. But for the most part, he's like an old golly gosh kind of person. And I like that. I think Superman as a character wears that well. It's what you would hope from someone who's going to aspire or inspire hope within children. Someone for children to look up to would be that kind of character. That's just me personally speaking. Save the vulgarities and stuff for people like Lobo, who I'm sure will pop up in Supergirl or whichever film down the line he will pop up in. Now, if you're not well versed in comic books, you won't know who Lobo is. So there's no point me mentioning it. But this film also has a lot of characters in that I would very much imagine, if you've not read comic books or even seen like the DC animated shows, you won't have a clue who they are. And Gunn doesn't waste too much time in trying to tell you. He tells you who they are through their character. Who are they as a person? As in, how do they react to any given event that's going on around them? We don't get a lot of backstory, for example, with Hawkgirl, but we know what kind of person she is, given, well, one particular action that she does in the film that like, for anyone, again, I know Hawkgirl mostly from the DC animated Justice League shows, and a running gag that me and my kids always had when we watched that show is that before she did anything, she would just hit stuff with a mace. She has this mace and she's very keen to just hit stuff with it. It's never really called out in the show, but it was just something we noticed. Every time she goes into a situation, the first thing she does is hit something with her mace. So we always shout, "Hit it with the mace," which is a bit of a running gag with me and my kids. But that was up there on screen, and it's like literally there's a point where she hits something with a mace, like literally like within being introduced within seconds. And I looked at my daughter, she looked at me, and we both said, "Hit it with your mace." And it's like, because as I say, we know her from the DC animated series, and I just think that if you have that kind of knowledge, that wider knowledge of characters like Hawkgirl, then things like that will feed you, I guess, within this movie. It'll be something you can reach out and go, yes, that's so Hawkgirl, without having to go into a major backstory of who she is. If you're not that well versed in the characters in that way, then I would imagine a lot of the characters in here, like Metamorpho, Hawkgirl, even Guy Gardner's Green Lantern, I think a lot of the stuff with them as characters won't feel very fleshed out. They won't feel like fully well realized people. As a comic book fan, to me, they do. And, you know, I look at Nathan Fillion in this as Green Lantern, the Guy Gardner version of Green Lantern, and all I can think about is the possibility that we're going to get a film down the line in which he gets punched out by Batman. Now, if you don't know the comic books, you're not going to know what I'm talking about there. Gunn does. And the world that he's built, the world that he's kind of, put on screen is catering to the people like me who know that stuff and will look for that stuff and feel like it's there in the fabric of the world that he's created. And the film itself feels very much like a comic book, in the sense that, I mean, like, even when I first got into comic books, the first comic book I ever picked up was a Batman comic book in which the person who was Batman isn't even Bruce Wayne, it was John Paul Valley. And now I'm getting into proper geekdom here. For anyone who isn't into comic books, you're switching off and you're like, yeah, I've no clue what this guy's talking about. But that's what comic books are like. When you come to it for the first time, you can pick up a Batman comic book, say, and think, oh, right, that'll be easy. I'll just get into that. And it's not that simple. You pick it up, you're halfway through a long-running storyline in which you kind of, okay, I feel like I need to go back a few issues and see what this is all about. But it doesn't matter how many issues back you go to try and get more into that story or reveal more about it. You'll always have to go further back. And this film kind of plays like that in a way where in a comic book, they'll give you just enough to know what you need to know in order to read this particular one. But they can't give you the whole, 80 years of history that a particular character has had. So I kind of like it, but I also completely understand why that would be off-putting for someone who isn't a comic book nerd, who just comes to this wanting a pretty self-contained story that is, again, the first in the universe. They would probably expect a bit more of an origin kind of thing there, and it's not really that. So I think that would be the most, other than the political element, if people want to make a big deal out of that, which I already know there are people who are doing that, who are turning this into just nothing but a political argument. Those people aside, I think the thing that will be most divisive about this film is that element of, I feel like this has another bunch of movies somewhere that I've not seen. And I think personally that's just the way comic books are. Pick up any comic book, that's what you'll get. And that's the audience that Gunn is catering to. For me, it kind of works because, like I say, I know who Guy Gardner is in the comic books. I know who Hawkgirl is in the comic books. I know I have a vague kind of overall picture of who they should be, and who they should be are right here on screen. Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane is great. Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor is great. I will say right now, this is my favourite interpretation of Lex Luthor in any Superman movie. I had a sneaking suspicion it would be, just because I really do like Nicholas Hoult as an actor. I think he's actually quite underrated. He doesn't, I know people do like him, but he doesn't quite have the status that I think he should have. But I think that status will improve exponentially now that he's played Lex Luthor. Even so, he's someone I've always liked as an actor, and he's quite playful here, even though he's really megalomaniacal. He is Luthor out of the comic books. You know, he's a scientific genius, but he's an absolute egomaniac, and he can't tolerate someone in the world who could usurp, you know, the kind of attention that he feels should be devoted to him. So yeah, that's all there. It's great. I love it. I think Hoult has tons of fun with it. Like I say, Brosnahan as Lois Lane really grounds Superman, Clark Kent. He's got this human touchstone, so he's not just this larger than life superhero figure. He's got this woman who's human, who keeps him grounded, who, you know, obviously he loves, and she challenges him. You know, there's one of my favourite scenes in the film, which has been shown in some of the trailers, a little bit of it anyway, is this big conversation they have when he lets her interview him as Superman. And they get into the moral quandaries of what, you know, just steaming into a situation. Again, something that was explored in Zack Snyder's Batman vs Superman, the start of that film. Very similar kind of thing here being explored. You can argue the merits of who deals with it best. I don't really care. I think they both were appropriate for the films they're in. But here, this conversation between Lois and Clark / Superman, in which she challenges him on things that, you know, that any reporter would ask. She doesn't softball him, and it's like suddenly an issue that should be a black and white issue on the face of it. You know, when you just come at it from a moral standpoint, or what you think should be a moral standpoint, suddenly ain't that black and white. It actually has a lot of grey areas in it. The choices you make, even if they're for virtuous reasons, have ramifications that, yeah, lead into roads that aren't so virtuous. And that's not because you intended it that way. It's just humans are messy. Human affairs, human interactions, politics, this, that, and the other, it's messy. And no matter how much you try to do the right thing and just, you know, as the film wants us to do, treat each other better, you're always going to come up against that fact that people are broken, people are messy. It's not that simple. I think the special effects across the board are pretty damn good. You know, they've clearly put a lot into it, but they've not half-assed it in any way. I would say that there are times when it gets a bit messy on screen, in the sense that there's so much going on that it just feels like an overload. Eddie Gathegi, I think that's how you pronounce his name, probably butchered that one, as Mr. Terrific. Really great. Brought a lot of humour to proceedings. He takes his superheroic business quite seriously, but because of the fact that he's essentially surrounded by numpties like Guy Gardner and, you know, Mrs. Hitting with the Amaze Hot Girl, he's fighting a bit of an uphill battle trying to get this team to do what they need to do, but he's clearly a bit of a loner who's stuck in a team game, and that creates quite a bit of humour throughout the film, I think. But yeah, he sells it, the actor sells it. Ma and Pa Kent, really good. They don't get much in this film. There's only a couple of scenes that they're in, but you do get a true sense of the meaning that they have in Clark's life from those two scenes. One in particular, quite touching. I felt quite touched by it, but not to the degree that it made me cry. However, there was somebody sat literally on my row, a guy who's older than me, much older than me, and he was in tears. So yeah, he had to get the tissue out, take the glasses off, and he was proper sobbing. So I was like, okay, that. But I can understand that. I can understand how that scene would hit hard. Like I say, I got emotional by it, but I'm not that big of a crier. So, you know, whatever. But it definitely, you know, I mean, that's Gunn's thing. That's what he's very good at. He's very good at the humour, but he's also very good at rooting things in something that is very human, that people can relate to, that gets you to feel for the characters. I don't have a right lot of negatives, to be honest, of this film. I watched it with my daughter. She loved it. I probably loved it even more because she loved it. Yeah, it was a fun time. It was a really great time at the cinema. Nothing too much to complain about. Nothing that I can think of, to be honest. And even right down to Crypto, Like I was always a bit on the fence with the idea of bringing Crypto into a live action movie. I mean, I know that Gunn's exceeded in, you know, having things like Rocket Raccoon and things like that, but that was a completely different kettle of fish. I felt, because it was a talking raccoon right there with, yeah, the fantasy element. You can play with that a bit more. But this is a dog. It's just a dog that happens to have superpowers. You still got to treat it like a dog. It's still going to behave like a dog, but what happens when a dog that's got superpowers behaves like a dog. So I always thought that was a bit of a risk, but it's a risk that pays off. You know, it's one man and his dog. There's a lot of heart in that, and it does play quite a big part in the story because of Clark's motivations, Superman's motivations, but in a way that is quite affecting. And yeah, as someone who, I was never that much of a dog lover until the last 2 years, where for the first time in my life I actually got a dog, and I have a dog now, and I understand that attachment, that bond that you have with this animal. I get it, is all I'm saying. I get the attachment, and while I think for sure there's that element that this is there for the kids, it's there for the adults as well. I think that because of the way it's handled, Crypto turns out to be a bold move that pays off. So there you go, that's my take on Superman, straight out of the cinema essentially. Just got back, recorded this. Who knows how it'll play on repeat viewings, but for now my score will reflect the fact that it is a first time watch. Not ready to give it 5 stars yet. I've been down that road one too many times, but on a first watch, tend to not give them out these days. So there you go. That's my thoughts. But what about you? Have you seen the new Superman by James Gunn? If not, are you looking forward to it? Do you think that there is enough room in the world for a James Gunn iteration alongside the Zack Snyder one? Can the two coexist without us all slapping each other in the face? I like to hope that they can, but there are some people. Anyway, let me know your thoughts on the film if you've seen it down in the comment section below. Thank you for watching this review, and until next time, cracking.